about the game that happened last night, the game that we both said was a huge game going into it for both sides. Jared Goff. My bad. This is one of the first real arguments that me and you, Josh, had on our first ever couple shows at Championship Rings. Would you take Geno Smith or would you take Jared Goff? And I defended Jared Goff, and I'm still going to defend Jared Goff because as I sit here today, you can make an argument that right there with Sam Darnold, somehow, right now, Jared Goff is the best quarterback in the NFC conference. He went 18 of 18 last night, nearly 300 yards. Even his coach didn't even know he was perfect. He said, I gave the game ball to somebody else. If I would have known that, I would have given it right to Jared Goff.
Yeah.
So, but I do think my biggest takeaway from this game is both things came true that I thought were going to come true. Number one, again, I said it before the year. I like Seattle. I thought their 3-0 was a little bit smoke screenish. They haven't really played anybody. I'm very concerned about the back end of that defense. And number two, on the Lions side, offensively, when they can run the football like that with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, and they remember that they have a powerful, ferocious offensive line with that great run game, they are very hard to beat.
If they get that number one seed, look out. I can't.
Right now, they're still a game behind Minnesota, and they got a lot tougher schedule than Minnesota. I'll just throw that out there.
Yeah, Detroit's next game is at Dallas, and then they're at Minnesota. So that's a brutal stretch right there. But Jared Goff was the better quarterback, no doubt about it. But you can't say Geno Smith had a bad game.
No, he didn't. But Geno's not going to win a game if you're throwing it 55 times. What is Seattle doing offensively? Kenneth Walker had 3 touchdowns, but they didn't even try to get him the ball in the first half.
Yeah, I'll give you that. But Geno had almost 400 yards passing. So that's not bad right there.
Yeah, but a lot of it was late in the game when you're trailing, you're down 2 possessions, and I call those empty calorie stat padding yards.
You can, but Seattle, they were trying to make a push late in that game.
Detroit stupidly decided to throw the ball from their own goal line, and basically Jared Goff nearly tried to avoid a safety. Turns out his knee was down. I don't know what the hell they were thinking there.
I think that was another Dan Campbell bumped my head moment.
No, I think that was Ben Johnson being too aggressive because Ben Johnson has the ultimate say in play calling, and they did have Tim Patrick, who I never understood why Denver cut him. I always liked him as a receiver. He was open on the deep post if their offensive line couldn't protect down on the goal line, which would have essentially ended the game. But in that situation, Seattle only has 1 timeout. Probably best to run the football. Again, we know these 2 teams. We know how well they played. We talked about it a couple weeks ago, and Dan Campbell said it, in an interview, or maybe it wasn't an interview. I think Joe Buck just said it when they were talking to Dan in their production meeting that, he knows the last couple of times they played Seattle what the result was. And, the Lions had quote unquote revenge on their mind, even though they don't play each other. It's division rivalries.
Yeah, I do. That's part of the reason why I do think there's a bit of a rivalry here between the Seahawks and the Lions. Maybe I'm in the minority on that one, but given how frequently they've played each other recently, and given how high scoring these games have been, and generally, I know last night didn't, but the last couple times, the game came right down to the final seconds.
It was really the same game they played the last 2 times. The difference was Tyler Lockett's fumble early in the first quarter put Detroit up 2 possessions.
Yeah. By the way, I loved those black jerseys from Detroit.
They did look sick. And by the way, I would love to see these 2 teams eventually play a game in Seattle because I think that'd be a way different story. Especially if it was in November. We know how Jared Goff struggles outdoors and struggles in the cold, but indoors on a Monday night in September, he can let it rip and he can be one of the best quarterbacks in the National Football League.
I'll tell you, say Jared Goff was the MVP of that game. I'm not going to argue with you on that one. But Amon-Ra St. Brown was just a monster in that game.
How about that play that I'm calling the Motor City Special?
That was awesome. Even though I was rooting for Seattle in that game, because they are my favorite team in the NFC, they always have been. But it's Browns above anybody else. But still, that play was just awesome. I loved it. Like, I feel like the Philly special or whatever we're calling it, it's almost becoming somewhat of a regular thing in the NFL. We've seen teams pull it off on prime time. The Browns did it on Thursday night a few years ago against the Jets.
And if you remember, they did a similar play in 2020 against Dallas where Odell Beckham basically ran around. I think it ended up being a run, but he tried to throw it, and there was just open room.
Yeah, and then I think he ended up scoring a touchdown on that play.
Yes.
But so I shouldn't say it's becoming a more regular play, but I feel like we're seeing that type of play a bit more in the NFL.
So let me have this for both teams. Me and you talked about it. I picked Minnesota to go in Green Bay and knock off the Packers. I was right on that. I said going into this game meant more to Detroit than it did for Seattle, because if the Lions fell to 2-2 and Minnesota's 4-0, Detroit's in trouble. Where the NFC West, the Rams, I like them, but it's just not their year. They're injury riddled. They got guys banged up all over the place. Maybe they get their guys back. They can make a late playoff run. Probably going to be hard to win the division. San Francisco looks like they're getting healthy again, minus McCaffrey, which Mason's done a good job filling in for him. And then you got Arizona, who we're about to talk about this guy here in a minute, but that was the most surprising outcome of the weekend for me. And not that Washington won, but how lopsided that game was.
Yeah.
So now Seattle, they got the Giants at home, which I'm sorry, that should be a win for Seattle. But then they host San Francisco
on Thursday Night Football.
To me, Seattle, you got to win one of these big games. You can't just beat up on the Giants, a Tua-less Dolphins team, New England, and Bo Nix to start his career and tell me that you're a good football team.
Yeah. So when I look at Seattle's upcoming schedule, they've got the Giants, then they've got the 49ers on Thursday Night Football, at Atlanta, host Buffalo, and host the Rams, and then at San Francisco.
So after the Giants game, I mean, I don't want to sound harsh here, but there's a reality, depending on how many guys the Rams get back, and McVay typically owns Seattle, no matter who their coach is then. I think could Seattle go 1-4, 0-5 in that stretch post Giants?
Maybe. So Detroit, meanwhile, has at Dallas, at Minnesota, host Tennessee, at Green Bay, at Houston on Sunday Night Football, hosting Jacksonville, at Indianapolis, and then hosting Chicago on Thanksgiving.
So I think they could go 4-4, 5-3 in that stretch, and we'll see how Minnesota does, obviously.
Yes, and then following Thanksgiving, they host Green Bay, and then they host Buffalo.
So, okay, let's go to this question, because Jayden Daniels has lit up the NFL world for 4 weeks. He is the best of all time, actually, for 4 weeks in terms of completion percentage, not just for a rookie. That's any quarterback in the history of the league. So the question on screen here, obviously, is would you rather have the rookie Jayden Daniels or combine Dak Prescott, Jalen Hurts, and the other two quarterbacks in the NFC East for the rest of the season? Now, this question is an interesting one because I don't even know what the hell I watched on Sunday other than my team and the Browns not knowing how to tackle. That was the worst Sunday of football watching I've ever had in my life. With that being said, I want to believe this turnover issue for Jalen Hurts is going to stop, because right now it's just a fumble issue. It's not even an interception issue. He hasn't thrown a pick. what this past game against Tampa. It was the bad fumble. When Philadelphia was trying to get back in that game, they had a chance to make it a one possession game. Dak is very good. He's always going to get you your empty calorie yards. He's going to beat up on bad teams. Jayden Daniels is wowing the world. Now, I don't think, like some people do, that this is an RG3 situation and he's going to flame out. I don't believe that at all. If you recall, and I keep telling you this, there's a reason why I picked the Commanders to be in second place and make a wild card. And now, to be honest with you, the Commanders may end up winning this division if Philadelphia continues to collapse.
I think,
So,
let me just stop you right there for just a second. I think the reason Jayden Daniels is drawing the RG3 comparison is not so much because he'll flame out. It's because of the big hits he's taken in college. And, like, if you remember, RG3 kept sustaining a bunch of injuries throughout his career with Washington when they went under a different name that I'm personally not going to say because I just don't like saying that name. But nonetheless, like, I think that's the reason he's drawing the RG3 comparison. Not so much because of the flame out
well,
aspect.
and I think people are forgetting. I don't know if you remember this, Josh. They started 3-6 that year. Then they rattled off 7 wins in a row to win the division. So, you
Yeah,
know,
but RG3 sustained multiple injuries while he's with Washington over multiple seasons.
he
It,
did. And, listen, they have played pretty bad defenses, right? The Giants, Arizona's defense, we think is okay. It's not great. And then who am I? Oh, Cincinnati's defense, who we know is not very good. So, and then you have Tampa's defense, who Todd Bowles rattled him in his first game as a starter. I'm interested to see how he plays this week against the Jim Schwartz Browns defense that has not been as good as advertised, but Schwartz is a very good defensive coordinator. To answer the question on screen, I think Jayden Daniels is going to have a very good year. I think there's going to be some regression at some point. I think Jalen Hurts and this Eagles offense is going to take off at some point. I think there's a great opportunity coming out of the bye to essentially save the season when you take on the Browns in week 6, which I will be on the Sports Room Talk Show with this man, Josh Unger, to preview that game on the Unger to the Next YouTube channel. I get Dak, who is always going to have top 5 numbers. I get Jalen Hurts, so I think by the end of the year we'll have a very good season. I think I'd rather have both those guys right now by a very slight margin over Jayden Daniels for the rest of the way. For the first 4 weeks, I give it up to Jayden Daniels. Let's see if he can sustain it for 13 more.
you like that we're not even including Daniel Jones in this discussion?
Hey, I got to be honest with you, man. Brian Dable, what the hell are you doing kicking 5 field goals? I mean, come on. Oh, you know what? If the Giants were more aggressive in that game Thursday night, I know I'm pulling a Josh Unger later on, getting a little bit off topic, but if the Giants were more aggressive and they just got 1 touchdown in that game, the Cowboys are 1-3, and I'm probably taking Jayden Daniels to answer this question.
Yeah. I think I am going to take Jayden Daniels for this question because based on what I'm seeing right now, it does seem like there's a bit of a disconnect between Sirianni and Jalen Hurts. And as of right now, I'm not sure how they're going to iron out those issues, even though they're on the bye week this week. That still scares me. And like you said, a lot of Dak's stats are in garbage time, whether it's because the Cowboys are blowing out their opponent or they're getting blown out themselves. So it's like what we're seeing from Jayden Daniels is he's sustaining this throughout the whole game. So
a lot of this is because they're up so much because they get up early and they're forcing the opposing teams to throw, not run as much. They're staying on schedule. I still need to see Jayden Daniels in a game where he's behind and he comes back and wins the game because he wasn't even that great against the Giants. Completion percentage wise, he was, but they did not get in the end zone. So
Now that part I agree with you. But let me ask you this, because I'm hearing these comparisons. You look at what C.J. Stroud did last year with the Houston Texans, and
Oh, I think this is so unfair. If this is the direction you're going, I'm not singling out you. I'm singling out the media for starting this bullcrap.
I'm
But go
no, I'm I'm not agreeing or disagreeing with the comparison. I'm just like bringing it into the discussion since we're talking about Jayden Daniels. Like we saw what C.J. Stroud did last year, brought a dysfunctional team in the Houston Texans all the way to a division title and a playoff win, and we're seeing kind of the same thing with Jayden Daniels. So, based on what you just said, you don't think those comparisons are like fair.
No, I don't. I
Why?
because I think they're two completely different players. I think that was 10 years ago, and I think that the NFL has changed very much so. And I think RG3 had a great week 1 against New Orleans.
No,
He
I'm not talking about RG3. I said
oh
CJ Stroud.
yeah. No, I got you. I thought you were talking about the comparisons that some people are making that Jayden Daniels is CJ Stroud and Caleb Williams is Bryce Young, which I think
No,
is absolute bullshit.
no, I'm not. I haven't even heard that comparison.
Because I've heard that talk all this week, and I think the media is freaking stupid trying to figure out questions.
No, I
Um,
haven't heard that. I'm just talking. I've heard about the comparison between what CJ Stroud did last year with Houston and what Jayden Daniels is doing with Washington this
Listen,
year.
did I not say before the year Washington has Houston elements to it? I remember specifically telling you that.
I believe you did, yes.
I said they got a young defensive head coach with a brilliant offensive coordinator, young quarterback, and good weapons who outside of McLaurin we didn't know much about. Same thing with Houston's weapons a year ago. Zach Ertz has had a career resurgence at tight end. Though again, I don't know how long that's going to last. I need to see more out of Washington. Like again, Stroud was good last year, but and we like the Texans, but and you were on them in the division more than I was. But we also have to admit it did take a Jacksonville collapse for Houston to win the division. This is an easier division, and I think, like I said, Washington right now is in the driver's seat unless Philadelphia comes out of the bye the way I think they can and absolutely get on a roll here with the couple games that they have. Cleveland, Giants, Cincinnati will be tough in Cincinnati, but then you got Jacksonville after that. So
Okay, you brought up Cincinnati and the Giants, so I gotta go off on a little bit of a tangent on this. The NFL had an opportunity to flex Bengals Giants out of Sunday Night Football and put Commanders Ravens into Sunday Night Football. And they decided, nah, we don't want Jayden Daniels versus Lamar Jackson in prime time. We want Joe Burrow versus Daniel Jones? Huh? What if why would you not flex that game between the Commanders and the Ravens into Sunday Night Football? I know it's only week 6, but you have the capability of flexing, and people want to see that matchup. I don't know anybody that wants to see Joe Burrow against Danny Derps. No, thank you.
no, I agree with you, but I also think if you notice, the NFL is very conservative when it comes to flexing games. And part of the reason is because they can only do, I believe it's two up until like week 13 or week 14, something like that. And then they get unlimited for the end of the year. Like Jacksonville at Philly right now, I think is one they're probably going to flex out in week 9. I haven't taken a look at the other games, but that's a candidate right now to be flexed out, especially if Philadelphia loses another game. Jacksonville, fires Doug Peterson because that's the whole angle on that game is Doug Peterson coming back to Philadelphia. So that's a candidate, and that might be one of the reasons why they didn't flex Bengals Giants because they're probably going to flex out Jacksonville Philly.
I also think in week 17 they'll flex out Dolphins Browns in favor of Packers Vikings.
That's the way it's looking right now. I got to tell you.